And making sure that you're maximizing each individual's child's gifts and talents for God's, because in the kind of the training sense, the goal is to maximize what God gave them, not to mold them into some prepackaged idea that you have. Work with what God gave them and let's make it as good as we possibly can.
Hi, this is Melanie Willis, and welcome to the Homeschool Show. As we finish out our summer break, we have one final repeat episode for you to watch. During this episode, our executive director, Matthew McDill, sits down and speaks with Michael Farris of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They discuss threats against homeschooling freedom and lots of other topics such as government funding, customizing your education plan based on your child's interests, the importance of marriage, and the spiritual power of mothers and how dads can help in your homeschooling journey. Let's watch.
All right. Welcome to the Homeschool Show from North Carolinians for Home Education. I'm your host today, Matthew McDill, and we have a very special guest, Michael Farris. And one of the reasons that we have him on the show is because he's going to be one of our featured speakers at the Thrive Conference. So Michael Farris was the founding president of both the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and Patrick Henry College. He served as president and CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom from 2017 to 2022. For over 40 years, Farris has practiced constitutional appellate litigation, specializing in religious freedom and parental rights. In semi-retirement, he serves as general counsel to the National Religious Broadcasters and consults with the Convention of States Project. For his work in homeschooling, Mike was named one of the top 100 faces in education of the 20th century by Education Week. Mike is the author of over 15 books. He and his wife, Vicki, have 10 children, many grandchildren, and one great-grandchild. And Mike, just want to welcome you to the show, and it's an honor to be able to talk to you. Also want to thank you for all your work, because I know that my family and many families in North Carolina have been enjoying freedom and the foundation for home education, at least, that you've been building.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you. And to clear up the mystery, it's 31 grandchildren, but that changes on a pretty regular basis. That's why we just throw it into the intro as many. We also have one great-grandchild, so that's... but there's a second one coming. So, you take over America your way, we'll take over America our way.
That's right. Yeah, it would be hard to update that every few months or every time there's a new grandchild, right?
That's right.
So we'd like to dive into some of these topics that Mike has prepared for the conference. And as I looked at these workshops, of course, I realized they're already the topics that I wanted to ask you about and talk to you about anyway. You know what people want to hear. So this is great.
Good.
The first is going to be the keynote. It's called The Ever-Escalating Battle Against Parental Rights. And to kick it off, my question is, from whom are the primary challenges to parental rights coming from at this time?
Well, there's a de facto army of people that are the kind of the establishment of the child welfare industry. That includes the public education elites. It comes from the social service elites, from the departments of health and human welfare. They have various names in various states. From many of the colleges, universities, in their training programs in these same fields. But they basically believe that children should be raised according to their philosophy and their worldview, and not the worldview of others, particularly Christians, Bible-believing Christians. They tell you they don't like others as well. When you boil it right down to the serious people of faith of other stripes, are not their favorites as well. But Bible-believing Christians are their number one opponent. And so we find them in academia, writing things that, for example, law professors in law review articles have written articles saying that homeschooling should be banned because we teach children that Jesus is the only way to God, and that we teach against what they call teaching against the Enlightenment, because we teach that ultimate truth is revealed and not created by man. And so they don't like people that have a different worldview, and they want all kids to be raised by their worldview.
Mm-hmm. And this battle, is the context assumed to be mainly legislatively?
Well, that's one of the principal areas, but administrative law is important as well. So what the bureaucracies are doing, the way things are enforced in juvenile courts, obviously public education is and their enforcement mechanisms they bring into the homeschool world is another component of it. Social service agencies, they work outside the legislative arena, but they're an important factor as well. So it's it's an entire child welfare industrial complex, if you will, and they have many venues that they work in.
So, as you know, one of the things that the home education groups and parents are dealing with a lot right now is school choice and the offering of government funding. A lot of these states are battling with this. Um, can you just speak to that issue and the importance of how home educators should be responding to this offer of money?
Well, I'll give you a hint of what I think, because by saying that I was the founder of Patrick Henry College, and even though there are government programs available for colleges, and frankly, I don't want the government to be making the decision to discriminate against religious people in those programs, but we didn't take anything. Patrick Henry College, because we wanted to maintain our freedom, uh, as a matter of principle, said we're not going to take any programs, and so. Um, I think that maintaining freedom is the most important value. Now, there are ways that conceivably could work. For example, churches you can give to our churches, and we can deduct that on our income taxes. So if there was a form of a school choice equivalent that was like that, where we simply could deduct our expenses for homeschooling or for private schooling from income taxes, I'd be open to a properly written methodology of that sort, but I'd be wary of direct government funding of schools, even if it happened, and okay, it happened. I wouldn't participate, and I would encourage others not to do so.
And you wouldn't participate. Would that be partly principled and or partly because of the concern of what would happen down the road pragmatically?
Both things would be factors. It depends on somewhat on the way the program works. I would have more principled objections to some kinds of the methodologies than others, but the fear of government regulation would be a component that would be front and center at all times.
Mm-hmm. So, how would you advise or encourage either homeschool leaders or homeschool families, just remaining on this topic of the battle against parental rights? What kinds of things can we do?
Well, the most important thing overall is to assert your rights. The in the child welfare context, I litigated cases in the Supreme Court of North Carolina many years ago, where social welfare agents showed up at family's home, the Stumbo family. This is many years ago now, and they were going to run over the rights of these people, but the Stumbos stood up and said no, and we ended up in court over it, and we ended up in the Supreme Court of North Carolina ultimately, and won there on a very important, decisive decision. But if the family had crumbled, um, the establishment of the parental rights would have evaporated.
Mm-hmm.
And so just simply standing up for your rights. So being knowledgeable about it, not doing it in a silly way or a haphazard way isn't a good idea, but thoughtfully, in a pre-planned fashion, standing up for your rights is important. And so, um, so I think that that's the biggest thing. And whether that is, personally with, somebody standing at your door, or whether it's legislatively or otherwise, being willing to say, I'm going to stand up for the principle that God gave these children to me and to my spouse and I, and we're going to make the decisions. We're not going to willingly let the government override our decisions in these important areas. Now, obviously, this is not an excuse for abuse. You do not have the right to do what is wrong. And so when we're talking about standing up for your rights, we're saying make proper and good, thoughtful medical decisions, even if they disagree with, the powers that be. But they're well thought through medical decisions, and well thought through disciplinary decisions, and so on. So one of the first cases I worked on is how often your kids go to church. That's your decision, not the government's. The government said once a week was enough for this family, and they wanted to take their child more often to church. They went to Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night prayer meeting, and they thought that was okay, and the government shouldn't interfere with their life because of those factors. And so, stopping short of real abuse, parents have an enormous amount of leeway, and the government should respect that.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So another interesting workshop title here is Key Insights from 33 Years of Homeschooling. Wondering if you could just share one or two of those insights with us.
Well, we have 10 children, and they have a great variety of gifts. And so the recognition that your children are different, and that the way homeschooling is so great is that you're allowed to change things really on the fly. That you're not stuck with some formula, and you shouldn't create formulas within your own family. And we have our three youngest were boys, and they all ended up in science and technology careers. Child number 8, John, is a computer programmer. Child number 9, Joe, is a geneticist at the Mayo Clinic with a PhD in biogenetics from Notre Dame. And child number 10, Peter, is going to finish his PhD in physics this year at Michigan State. But even, as close as those kind of things sound, they were all different. We had to do things differently between John, Joe, and Peter. And, when you take it, and some of our girls who were more inclined toward the verbal skills than at least those three boys, although they had pretty good verbal skills as well. But, they had these specific giftings in math and science, and we fed those giftings in math and science. Others we fed their giftings in arts, and others we fed their giftings in a variety of ways, in athletics, and some of them were more musically inclined than athletically inclined. And so just knowing that even within one family, and even if your kids are only 18 months, 2 years, 3 years apart, they're going to be a little different, and making sure that you're maximizing each individual's child's gifts and talents before God. Because in the kind of the training sense, the goal is to maximize what God gave them, not to mold them into some prepackaged idea that you have. Work with what God gave them, and let's make it as good as we possibly can.
Well, and that's, of course, as you said, one of the beauties of home education is the ability to customize and individualize and be flexible and make the changes. It also occurs to me that that's a great responsibility and quite a lot of hard work to find out for each child, how did God make them? What are their interests? And then tailoring the education for that seems like quite a bit of work, huh?
It is, but of course the tailoring becomes a lot more important when they're in high school. Up until then, you're really building two sets of competencies and then exposure. The competencies are in the two relevant languages to learnings, which are words and numbers. And so you need to make sure that all your children, no matter what their gifts and talents are competent in words and competence in basic math skills. Up until, I would say, at least Algebra 1. Every child needs to be, if at all possible. If you have, really special kids that are different orientations. But 95+% of the kids, you need to make sure that they get these competencies in words and numbers. Anything you do before the high school level in science or history or other things is going to be at the exposure level. You're not going to make kids experts in U.S. history, really, even by the time they're finished with high school. But you're going to expose them. But you want to, so you have time. It's not like you have to do this kind of flexibility with a first grader. First graders, first grade's first grade, and you'll find that one child learns a little differently than another child, so there's adaptability in that way. But the general goals of first grade are the general goals of first grade, and so you've got time. You've got 12 years to mold and make and maximize, not 2 weeks. It's this is a very long range race, and so parents, yes, it is hard work. Anybody that says homeschooling is not hard work is lying to you. But it's very worthwhile work. But it's also slow in terms of the need for change and adaptability. You've got a long pathway to do that, and you can change over time, and you can try stuff. And if that doesn't work, you can try something else, and you haven't really done any material damage.
And as you said, if it's really more toward the high school years that the more customization occurs, they are also much more able to work independently at that time and pursue all sorts of things on their own, which is a great season for them to develop in that way as well.
Exactly. And we used very little outside resources, in terms of like classes with others or anything. But the one exception was our 3 youngest boys. There was a guy in our church who has a PhD in physics, and he had a homeschool. He was a homeschool dad, and he had a son was roughly the age of our 3 youngest sons, and he was going to teach some science classes, and he invited us and a couple other families to participate. So they were in science class with this PhD physicist, and we said, "Great, this is a good thing." I mean, we could teach them science, but he did it better, and so those kind of flexibilities and adaptabilities are flourishing in homeschooling these days. When we first started in the 80s, we started homeschooling in 1982. There weren't those kind of options for very many people. But today there's lots of options. And so enrichment, special classes, and really that's the only classes that any of our 10 kids materially had was in the science areas. We had one other guy that taught some of our other kids in science one time, but that's it. You can do a lot of it yourself in many cases, but there's so many choices, and I especially like the choices in the high school years where you could, mix and match and a la carte kind of choices. I think are great.
Do you have one other key insight that would come to mind that you could be sharing in that workshop? Or
your relationship with your spouse is more important than your homeschool program. And if you don't have a strong marriage at the center of all that you do, you labor in vain, or you make your labor much more difficult. And so making sure that you take time to have a marriage-focused family that serves your kids well, but you're not a child-centered marriage in that sense. I mean, the outside world will think you're a child-centered marriage because of all the time you spend. Well, that's true to a degree, and especially by comparison. But you and your spouse will know when each other remain the priority as opposed to the kids are the priority. Are they important? Indeed, they're very important. But the priority's got to be with your spouse.
All right, that's fantastic. So, moving on to another one here. I love the title, "The Spiritual Power of a Mother." In contrast, the father workshop is just the homeschooling father. So I love the implication and inspiration of, wow, I want to hear about the spiritual power of a mother. Tell us about this title in the workshop.
Okay. Well, I for about 3 years pastored a little church. And this was actually originally a Mother's Day sermon that I gave.
Okay.
But I mean, the people in our church were like 95% homeschoolers. And so one of the ladies in the church, after I gave this sermon, uh, said she had just been to a homeschool conference in a different state, not where I live. And she looking for encouragement and really hadn't found what she was looking for. But the message I gave on Mother's Day was so encouraging to her that it was what she needed. And so I've I change it a little bit, but the basic outline is I look at women in the Bible and I see how mothers in the Bible affected their kids, and it's the power of the mother's prayer, power of a mother's training, power of a mother's protection. And so I look at Scripture and stories in Scripture. I compare it to homeschooling, and it's blessed a lot of women. I've had women come up to me after I gave this message and said that they'd been taught things about the sins of the parents being visited unto children to the third and fourth generation. And she believed that her 7 daughters were condemned to repeat her sins that she engaged in when she was a young woman. And she was just living in terror of that. And when she heard my message, she said, she realized that God doesn't hold our yesterdays against us. That the 3 and 4 generations prediction is for those who willfully stay on that cycle. If you want to stay on the cycle of disobedience to God, well, that's what will happen. But if you are desirous of being on the upward cycle, the cycle of obeying God, there's a cycle of blessings. And it's not 3 or 4 generations, it's 1,000 generations of blessings. So that there's so much more power in God's blessing cycle than in the consequences cycle. And so, for moms to know that God gives them a fresh slate, and if the mom's heart desires to do the right thing with her kids before God's, she can get on that cycle of blessing and see great things in her kids much better than she was. Even if she had a pretty good upbringing and a pretty good young womanhood, but especially if she had struggles and other things, and wants to see her kids have a better opportunity, the Word of God gives her clear guidance on how to do that.
So before we move to dads, can you talk just a little bit about the role of prayer and for the moms and how to do that, or the importance of that?
Well, sure. The example that I use from that talk is from Samuel's life. And Samuel's mom prayed for him to come into existence, and then prayed for him that he would serve God. And so and then I use spiritual examples from our own family and others, but there's no doubt that God answers a mother's prayer, and the ultimate reason that that's true and so powerful is that mom's prayer and the love that embodies is mingled with God's love. And so that mixture of mom's love mingling with God's love through the medium of prayer is so powerful in a child's life. And Samuel plus real life examples that I use now show that how true that is and how powerful it is.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's talk a little bit about dads before we go, and just share maybe how can we encourage the dads who are listening now with their role or steps they can take toward letting the Lord use them in their kids' lives.
Well, in the interest of time, and in desire not to give them the entire talk in 2 minutes, I'll just focus on one thing. Dads need to make sure that they're helping their wife in the homeschooling project. And that can be done by dads helping with academics. Some dads have time to do that. Other dads don't. Some dads have talent to do that. Other dads may not have as much talent as their wife. But whether it's academic or not, the main thing, the overarching thing, is that the mom understands, and that by the dad's actions, not just his words, his actions, that this is a joint project that they're undertaking together. And so taking items off of the mom's to-do list and putting them on his to-do list, whether that's grocery shopping or, checking spelling tests or, doing laundry, or it doesn't really matter which of the lists, it'll vary by the family and the circumstances, what the items are, but the mom supporting the wife by her knowing that I'm going to take things that would otherwise likely be on your to-do list and I'm going to do them. And that she knows that she's not being left to dangle and that the homeschooling project is her deal. No, it's his deal too. In fact, spiritually, it's primarily his deal. And he's got a really wonderful wife if she takes, the heavy load off of his plate, because scripturally it belongs on his plate to direct the upbringing of his kids. His wife's a clear part of that, but if you're, and really more it's joint. But if you're going to have to apportion it, it lands on the dad's plate first. And so just shouldering that responsibility and emotionally making sure the mom doesn't burn out by feeling alone. That's the real theme of the thing that I think is important.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say to parents who are on the edge? Should I come to the conference? Should I come to a homeschool conference? How would you encourage them that this is an important thing for them?
Well, first of all, I'll do that with 3 different categories of parents. People that are thinking about homeschooling. So if you're in the I'm thinking about homeschooling category, you absolutely need to come to this conference, because the basic knowledge that you'll get about how it's done, the emotional and the spiritual frameworks that are important for you to adopt and to learn about and be trained in. You'll get exposure to all those things. You'll get a great opportunity to see curriculum in the vendor hall, and you can listen to make good decisions by examining and talking to people who know what they're talking about in the various curriculum. All of the above and more. So if you're thinking about it, absolutely you need to come. If you're fairly new to homeschooling, you need to hone your skills, and you need to get a constant source of encouragement. One of the things that can happen is people start to burn out, and they don't see the value, because you've been in for a couple of years. The value in a couple of years is not as great as the value if you've been in 10 or 12. You see the value more when you've been in longer. And so if you've been in a short to medium time, come for the encouragement, great, improving your skills, improving your knowledge. I would say encouragement is the longer is the priority in that sphere. Then the third group is people who've been homeschooling a long time. And you need to be there for all the reasons I just said. Plus, in the hallway conversations and others, you can help others. People will there'll be opportunities to chat with others, and you can help lead others, encourage them. So it doesn't really matter what season of homeschooling you're in. There is a really good reason for you to be there, no matter which it is. And God will use it in your life, and God may use you to serve others while you're there. You never know. Especially if you're an experienced family, you're standing in line for food or whatever, and you start talking to the people next to you, and they're brand new or they're just considering it. Boy, what you say to them will be so important at that point.
Mm-hmm. We've had some of our attendees talk about our conference feeling like a family reunion, and they keep coming back because of all the friendships and discussions that they have in addition to the vendor hall and the workshops. And I really appreciate that idea that you can come not just for what you get, but the way that you're blessing others. And I would also add, as you said, that if we're constantly adjusting to our children's ages and stages and needs and interests, then we're always learning. Then we're always at a new point to learn a new stage and a new subject, or a new, how do I handle this new situation? So it's helpful all the way through.
All of the above. Yes,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in May, and hope all of your work until then goes well. We're real thankful for all that you do.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it. And, of our 31 grandchildren, 5 of them live in North Carolina. So I have a special reason to desire to be there. So
yeah, that's great. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.